Clap the slate. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to that Eurovision site, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. My name is Shiloh, and I am joined today by Angus. How are you today, Angus?
Hi, I'm good. I'm just glad to be here, to be honest. How are you?
I am okay. I have been home from work for approximately 15 minutes, but I work a pretty chaotic day job, so talking about San Marino is like the chill part of my day. So yeah, we are here today to talk about Una Voce per San Marino, the national final from San Marino this year, and boy, was it something.
It was a televised event.
It was one of the televised events of all time. So Una Voce per San Marino, there were emerging acts auditions that happened in October. And many artists, 106, I believe, to be exact, qualified for the 4 semifinals that began on February 20th of this year. So let's start with the semifinals. Angus, how did you feel about the semifinals? Were there any songs that stood out to you? Was there anything that you feel like was unfairly left there?
I mean, I was entertained. Let's start with that. It was scrappy. The production value wasn't there. Many people weren't singing at their best because the venue also wasn't helping them with that.
Yeah.
That being said, it was entertaining to watch. The song quality was actually pretty high on average, I would dare say. Like it wasn't amazing or anything, but I was like, there were multiple songs here that I actually wouldn't mind hearing at Eurovision. Um, like the problem also with talking about the semifinals is that you sort of had a double semifinal, which was semifinal 5, which was the second chance for the previous semifinalists. Um, some songs that positively stood out to me that didn't make it to the final, because I was actually fairly happy with most of the finalists. Like the final was actually fairly solid. Acoustic Couple with Hellrider were pretty good. Super Boom by Andre, I have more affection for than I should. Dangerous by Atwood was a great song let down by the vocal on the night. Camilla, It's Not You, It's Me. Daudia, What If, Steps of the Way by Dionysian, Thunder by Drama Love, My Time by Chiara DV featuring Pamela Yvonne Cole was the 90s vibe I needed. Bleach by Only Sarah, Pardon Moi, and Fawn by Raw Strings was one of the strongest rock entries, and Suramatsu by Treta Vole. And Ice Eye, the unfortunate Finnish band who entertained everyone far too much with their poor vocal performance on the night, sadly. Overall, the semifinals were just, it was a good mix of genres and languages, surprisingly, and just different vibes and energies. And yes, there were some songs that made you question, how did this get through the audition process? Like, what was being left behind?
Right.
But I was still entertained.
Yeah. Overall, I actually very enjoyed watching the semifinals because they were just so like it just moved so quickly, and the hostess would just be like, all right, here's the next song, here we go, she'd leave, we'd have the song, all right, here's the next song, here we go, she'd leave, it'd be the next song, which I really appreciated because there were up to 27 songs in each of these semifinals. And that's a lot. And so I really appreciated the pace. I actually had a lot of similar favorites to you. Super Boom by Andrew was actually also on my list of songs that I think were unfairly left in the semifinal. I also like Daniel Schumacher's song Skin I'm In. It's like a little bit, it was a little bit twee, a little bit like the thing that it is, which is like a song that is like, I'm going to be a pride anthem, but like sometimes those can be good. And I thought he did it well, and I liked it, and I appreciated it. Um, I I was largely satisfied with the songs that made it into the final, though, of the semifinals that I live tweeted anyway, where I have like recorded opinions on everything because there were so many songs that the stuff where I didn't write down my thoughts. It's like, well, what did I think? What did I think? Yeah. Um. So so the final. Um. Let's start with the songs that were in the final. Um. Just the songs. We'll talk about the format in a moment because we need to talk about that format. But what do you have to say about the performances in the final and the semifinal, I guess?
I mean, the performances in the final were stronger on average, I think, than in the semi-final. Not just because most of the best performers went through. Um, there was a change of venue as far as I'm aware, and as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the semi-finals were actually pre-recorded the performances, and then
I believe so.
yes, and I do think that just the proper preparation that all the artists got for the final did help. Um, I mean, I actually don't mind the winning song. It probably was my favorite of the night.
Really?
I mean, I of the rock entries, I liked Non Bastera by the Shaders or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
however that's pronounced, more, even though they had zero stage presence. Let's be real. Uh, and then I have Tomba by Roy Paci. I surprisingly
Yeah.
like. And then the two double headers of Sacro e Profano and Fuoco e Bezina, they just stuck with me as well. But yeah, no, overall it was the songs in the final were for the most part pretty decent. And yes, I had my favorites like I just listed. But even beyond that, I would have been all right with most of the songs on the night going to Eurovision. Like they wouldn't stand out negatively to me on the Eurovision stage, depending, of course, on staging, which always remains a question
Yeah.
because we didn't get really any staging here. So you are grading this, or I'm grading this at least on a curve because the sound engineering isn't quite there because they are working on a small budget in a small San Marinese theater, which also means that the staging can't really be there because they're limited with that, and the artists, because they're not necessarily from around there and didn't get that much preparation time, they couldn't really think of full choreography packages or anything either. But I was pretty impressed actually with what most of the people delivered.
I definitely agree that like doesn't stand out negatively. Sometimes that's what you need to ask for. Um, as I mean, I have Eurovision songs that I hate. Like I just hate them. Um, and then there are songs that I actually kind of enjoy because they wound up in a running order near a song that I really hated. And I was like, oh, this is so nice after what we just went through. um, but unfortunately, I did not like I did not like an animal all that much, and to we will get to that in more detail. Um, I also really loved Roy Paci's entry tromba. I thought it was so fun. Um, would it have had any kind of success at Eurovision? I don't know, but I had a good time. Like he's just having a good time, like dancing around and playing the trumpet. I it's fun. I like it when the songs are fun. um, I Also, really, the other finale songs I really enjoyed was Eduardo Brogi's Due Punti sull'Equatore, which placed, I think, like sixth on the night. And then also Sacro e Profano was another one that I enjoyed quite a bit. Um, yeah, that's those are most of my thoughts on the final. I actually, before we move on, I am curious about your thoughts on Ranella because I feel like we have to address this.
We should. I'm not a fan of the song.
Mm-hmm.
I was so maybe it's fair to give like sort of a general Ronella rundown, which is
Yeah.
originally when she won Festival of Kengish, I was quite a fan of it, and then for me the change up, I don't want to necessarily call it a revamp, even though there was revamping going on, but just changing from the live orchestra to not a live orchestra really diminished the impact the song had on me, which is not necessarily fair perhaps towards the song because a live orchestra is more likely to have that impact, but
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. But yeah, she didn't qualify to many people's surprise, and then she was like, "Oh, I'm going to try out for San Marino this year," to everyone's surprise. And Savaje is it's just it it doesn't do anything for me as a song, and as it's like, and of course it's not like, oh, this song's supposed to give you an emotional response, but it also doesn't quite, it's not as danceable or as boppy or as much of a banger as some of our other post Eurovision output has been, which has actually been pretty good. So that was a bit of a shame, and I think her finishing outside of the top 10 is not unfair,
Mm-hmm.
even if it feels harsh considering what everyone is expecting of San Marino.
Yeah. Like there were genuinely better songs than that. Which I liked Secret. I liked Ronella Hayati's Eurovision performance. I think it's in like, I don't think it was in my top 10, but I think it was in my like top 15 or something, maybe. Like I enjoyed it a lot. But this was just you know, Eurovision fans were like, "Oh, she's competing in San Marino," and there was a great deal of hype. And I think that Salvaje did not live up to that hype. And for me, I like many other people, well, not many other people at the site, but like a few other people at the site, I do take some joy in being a hater. Okay, yes, you too. Yeah, yeah. I do take some joy in being a hater. And so for me, to see her be so overhyped and then to do badly, it's like, oh, this is kind of funny. I'm just like, I want people to not get what they want.
So, speaking of being professional haters,
Yeah.
and one of the songs you mentioned, Due Punti sull'Equatore, I put that in my list of songs to slander Italy with. Now, regular listeners of the podcast know that I love to slander Italian men when they're singing. Unfairly sometimes, I'll admit, but I just love to do it. Especially because the Italian women in Sanremo are always amazing and always get
Mm-hmm.
paid dust, especially this year. But yeah, this was just one of the songs like Eduardo Broghi would genuinely have done well in Sanremo, I think, and I would have been happy with that.
Yeah. So speaking of slandering Italy, it's time to talk about the final and the interval acts. It's time to talk about it. And I think that I need to, before we get going, I did not know that the final was going to be like this. I was asked, hey, can you do the San Marino final? And I said, sure. The semifinals were so nice and quick. I'm sure the final will be just like this. And then it was not. And I was very confused. But Angus, what did you? Please go ahead.
I mean, the final was long and wild, and I don't think anyone, including San Marino itself really was adequately prepared for anything that was to come. I was thoroughly entertained between the decent songs and performances, and even like most of the intervals were pretty decent. They made sense. To slander Italy, there wasn't an unfunny comedian that suddenly went on stage for too long. That did happen during Sanremo. We all know it. But yeah, no, but it was long. There weren't. It wasn't. It didn't feel the longest. I've had to live tweet Gracious Dora this year, which went on for years, it seems, and Malta Schlagerparade during. Yeah, that was also something to try and survive, especially as, again, regular listeners will know, non-Schlager fan. That was a struggle and a half, but it was a bit much. The reason why I think I'm fairly kind to San Marino here is because while they do make a serious attempt at things, they aren't taking themselves too seriously while doing that. Um, which is one way of just saying it has a camp factor, and
Yeah.
it might be bad, but call it camp and it's just fun, which is not necessarily fair, but it's what I do. But it was too long. There was a bit too much. It could be a bit trimmed down, or at least
Yeah.
scheduled beforehand, so we know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of, we didn't know what the running order was going to be before we watched the show. And we would have like two songs perform that were competing. And then we'd have an interval act. And it would just go on and on and on. And I'd be like, are we moving on? And then there would be a commercial break, or then we would cut to the ad for the San Marino outlet experience. um, and I mean, I some of the interval acts were fun. They were funny. Senhit is great. I love Senhit. Um, I'm I enjoy her. I'm generally a fan of her. I thought she was pretty funny. I don't really speak any Italian, but I got the vibe that she was quite funny. Um, and she, like, there were these bits, she'd walk out in these like crazy clothes, and she was singing, and she was great, and I really enjoyed having her there. um but just, it would be two songs, and then there would be this whole long break, and live tweeting I was going like, okay, here's this song, and here's the artist, and here's the song, and here's what the performance is like. And then I would like be sitting there for like 5 minutes trying to figure out what's going on, and go into the live tweet thread to be like, I haven't died, I just don't know what's happening. So it was a little, and we didn't know how long it was going to be. Once I figured out that it was going to be long, and that there were going to be interval acts every few entries, I said something in our chat like, oh, like, I don't like, does anybody know how long this is going to be? And Rory's like, oh, it's 4 hours. And then it was like something like 5.5. And I just like, I guess that I wish it had been a little bit more planned. I'm not against the interval acts. Um Especially since, like San Marino only has so big of a budget, and they're trying to get as much like viewership on the show as they possibly can. I'm not against them, and I liked some of them. There were some of them I really didn't like. We did not need a Beatles medley and then another separate Beatles song elsewhere in the program.
Hi, Serbia.
Hi, Serbia. Yeah. We didn't need the Beatles, but or we didn't need that much Beatles anyway. I'm not gonna I don't know how our listeners feel about the Beatles, so I'm not gonna uh um but I just wish that we had some kind of a timetable, and that it didn't feel quite so thrown together, and that like we had an end time and we had a running order, instead of the person who was filling in the article as things were going. I think it was maybe Rory or Rosie being like, hey, like, do you know what the running order is? I'm like, I don't know, like, check my thread. that's the only place it's been written down. I guess they're updating Wikipedia in real time. Like, I wish that we had gotten some kind of plan about here are the interval acts, and here's how long we're going to run, and here's the running order, and here's how voting is going to work, and how the winner is going to be presented. And I guess maybe part of this is coming from a place of I haven't watched the San Marino national final before. Before this Eurovision season, I hadn't watched any national finals in a long time. It's been, I think the last time was the 2017 or 2018 season that I kept up with any national finals at all. And Una Voce per San Marino obviously started in that intervening time where I wasn't really keeping up. And so maybe part of my whole, oh my God, this is so much, give me some structure, I'm dying, is because I didn't watch the previous iterations of Una Voce per San Marino. But, you know.
I do think they're still experimenting. The two things I will say is the not knowing the running order and that being chaotic. I feel that I had that with the Maltese semi-final where they didn't tell you the running order beforehand, and then in the show they gave it to you in blocks of 6, but the presenter just quickly said it, and between not knowing Maltese and trying to follow along, I was just like, I'll just wait for the artist to show up and the little like bumper to appear, whatever. But the other thing is San Marino is still definitely experimenting with the format. This is the second year they're doing Una Voce. Last year they had Senhe as a real host on stage. Like there was much more of a hosting job going on, for better and for worse. I don't recall as many interval acts. I believe Senhe was just doing like a medley of her songs and then some other Italian stuff mostly. I could be entirely wrong here, but that's just the vibe I remember.
Yeah.
So they're clearly sort of experimenting. It was also a surprise that we got this many entries this year because there weren't supposed to be 106 competing songs. I believe they said earlier something like 26, so they only had one semi worth of songs. Okay, but they're clearly experimenting with the format. Will it get to great Eurovision results? I don't know, but I don't think that's the point of it at the moment. I think the main point of it is keeping San Marino in Eurovision and in the public eye. And of course, San Marino being in Eurovision is part of being in the public eye. And I do think it is successful at that because the entire Eurovision fandom is talking about what is going on in San Marino and how many nights are there and how many songs are competing. And what do you mean Eiffel 65 is showing up? We
Yeah.
didn't even mention them, by the way.
Huh?
Eiffel 65?
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't even mention them yet.
No, they weren't that good.
They really weren't.
And I will say that is something, keeping themselves in the public eye through Eurovision is really a strength of San Marino's. Because you have, I mean, they had Flo Rida. The first Eurovision I ever watched was Serhat's I Didn't Know. And that was also greatly discussed. This is being memorable is a strength of theirs. And I feel like they will continue with that. But before we talk about Piqued Jacks, or however you pronounce it in Italian, I want to pronounce peaked like the English word, but I don't know. Do you have any more Italy slander? Because I feel like while we're discussing the final, now is the perfect time.
Oh, I mean, I could slander Italy and Sanremo for hours and hours, as everyone at the site will know.
Yeah.
The thing, like, I already touched on San Marino being serious while not taking itself too seriously, and that is something that I feel that balance is something that Sanremo just is unable to do, and that's fair. It's an institution. It has such a long history. It's so important. Sure, but at the same time, it tries to be like silly, goofy. And on the one hand, you have singers like they're singing so earnestly, and that can be emotionally affecting. And if it is, that really clicks. But if then that song does not click with you, it's just terrible schmaltz that you just want to turn off and never hear again. And for me, it mostly falls into that second category for reasons unknown and known. So that is just something where I'm like, here at least I had like also the good variety of ways that people were singing in Italian women were actually going appreciated and going to the final and actually finishing high. Sure, we didn't have any women winners this year or previous year, but still, Ladeva would not have been in the top five even of Sanremo any year, I'm sorry to say. So that is just stuff I really appreciate. Um, as chaotic and as wild and everything as San Marino is, I think that is part of the charm. And I haven't been able to get the charm of Sanremo yet, whereas for San Marino it just is an immediate click.
Yeah. So we talked about placement a little bit there. This is the best segue we're gonna get for so we had a winner. So Piqued Jacks won with their song Like an Animal, which how do you feel about the song, Angus?
I feel like I'm one of like five people in the world who enjoy it. Um, like I'm not saying it's great, and obviously we're working with a rather poor live recording. Um, the lyrics aren't great. I'll give people that, but I let that wash over me. It's like sure, whatever. I don't know why, but I just ignore it in this case. I do think that the band were actually did have a pretty good stage presence. Um, which is all we can say about the staging because there obviously wasn't more staging. Musically, I quite like song. It has sort of this nothing but thieves, this modern like alternative, slightly hard alternative rock vibe that I just really enjoy. And it's the kind of sound like obviously there's so many different rock genres and there's plenty we haven't really heard in Eurovision, but this is still something that's both commercially viable, so potentially successful at Eurovision, even though I don't necessarily think this will do well, and still like something we haven't heard much in Eurovision that I would like to hear more of. But yeah, as I said, like the lyrics, I understand that a lot of people just bounce off it. It's also not a sound that's for everyone. We're working with not the best recording, but yeah, no, I have it in my top 10 of all the songs we have so far, and we have had some true bangers already this year.
Yeah, I actually went on the My Eurovision scoreboard app to see in our site group. Did anybody give San Marino points? And if yes, was it you? The app is glitching and I can't it's showing San Marino as having 30 points while also sitting at about 20th, which is not that's not right. I know that's not right. It does this. It's a broken app. We love it for what it does. It doesn't always work. But it's I don't hate it. That what I was saying before about like there are songs that I hate. We have songs this year in Eurovision in the lineup already that I hate, that I do not like at all. There are more than one. And Like an Animal is not one of those songs. It's like okay. I don't like, do I love it? No. Am I a little weirded out by the lyrics? Yes. I mean, when I was listening to it for the first time while live tweeting the final, I was like, I am hearing the word sex a lot. I'm hearing like what? And I'm not usually a lyrics listener generally, and I've said this at least in our internal site chat, if not on a podcast or a video yet. So if you haven't heard me say it, I'm not really a lyrics listener. But when I hear something like that, it's just like, oh, this is going to stick in my head forever. And some of the lines in Like an Animal really are going to stick in my head forever. But overall, it's not a terrible song. It could do okay at Eurovision. I don't know. I will make no promises. I will make no predictions. I think it's really up in the air, but I don't think it's like destined to flop. I think there's a world in which they pull this off and it qualifies, you know? At least. I think it could happen.
I think part of that also is just like what do we consider a flop for San Marino? And I think
Yeah.
anything that's not last place they would already consider pretty decent. And semi-final two it's a wild one. Like there's a lot of songs that people rate highly, but I would also argue there a lot of those songs are, well, I wouldn't want to say jury dependent. I think they would score if they get to the final, they would score higher with the juries than with the public. And with us going to a full public voting system for the semifinals this year, that could throw everything into disarray.
Yeah.
So a lot just remains to be seen, and it's just very much an unknown.
And of course, there are some songs that we haven't even had performed live yet. Many of the internal selections, we don't know what the live performance is going to look like, and we, as that live performance was, we know the song can be performed live. We know they've done it.
His voice was fine.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. He's not a bad singer. It's just, it's what you were saying before about the staging. We don't really, the circumstances of Una Voce per San Marino being what it was, we didn't get a lot of really good staging ideas, but they might find a way to stage it in a way that's really good. I think we have to start wrapping up.
Yes, I would just want to say clearly San Marino, I said this in the group chat, in the internal one as well. San Marino is working through something. Last year they had Stripper, which was, very like,
oh, I love Stripper.
And right,
I liked it a
was
lot.
riding on a bull, and this year they're smelling stuff like animals, and it's also sex everywhere. The jury's
San Marino is a teenage boy hitting puberty.
Yes,
can we call it that?
Going through something.
They joined Eurovision in 2008, which makes them approximately 15 years old in Eurovision.
That works out. I also just appreciate them for going for brand. Clearly, they are like, what our brand is now, just slightly grimy rock songs with weird lyrics.
Sometimes that's what people watch it for. I mean, very, very quickly, do you feel like the format of Una Voce per San Marino is working overall?
I mean, as I said, to keep the money coming in as well, to help San Marino go into Eurovision, because previously they were dependent on Senate coming with money, or Serhat coming with money, or Saint Valentina
Moneta,
Like they had to pony up basically to help fund, and now competing in Eurovision isn't necessarily that expensive, and I've written an editorial about this and everything, but it clearly is helping them fund their Eurovision efforts, and that are without like defrauding artists or anything. Like they're just, it's genuinely like every artist is paying a small fee, and that way San Marino can go to Eurovision, and that I already really appreciate. It is exposing these artists to a bigger audience or different audience. I think we need to wait a few years to see whether San Marino can at least reliably be in the middle of the non-qualifying pack, or better in the semifinals. If they start reliably finishing second to last or last, they need to change something up. But as such, I don't think there's anything wrong with this format.
Yeah, I think, and I said this about the changes to Festivalia Congas in the recap video for that as well. Like, I think I'd like to see them continue doing this for a few more years to see how it pans out, rather than, if like an animal does badly, them just like scrapping it and internally selecting the one Sammarinese artist who was like actually in the final. There were supposed to be two. One of them didn't perform. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it. What are the words I'm looking for? I'd like to see them keep going at it, keep taking a stab. Even if I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the song they're sending this year, that would probably be Angus. Yeah. I guess that's all for today from us at That Eurovision site. You can find us at That Euro site on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. This video will also be released on our podcast feed, which you can find at That Euro Podcast on at least Twitter and
Facebook, and That Eurovision podcast is available via the website, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, your podcast app of choice. The podcast doesn't have a separate TikTok though, right?
No.
Okay. We have one TikTok.
Yes.
Yes.
That is mostly Tim posting.
Yeah. The TikTok, yeah. um, no, so few of us are on TikTok. We're just like, we'll just let Tim do it. Yeah. Thank you so much again, Angus, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
I am at Fighting Right on Twitter, and that's basically the only place I'm semi-active. But you can also find all my other social medias and data over on the Meet the Team tab of that Eurovision site.
Yeah. If you are a Tumblr person, which I know very few people are, I am mostly on Tumblr these days at deep-hearts-core because Twitter is slowly but surely falling apart. And yeah, thank you for joining us today as we talk about San Marino, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.